Welcome to Channel X TV, sponsored by Volo. Delighted to be joined today by my colleague Ian Jindal, Editor-in-Chief of RetailX and Internet Retailing. How are you, Ian?
I'm very well, thank you, Chris, and lovely to be chatting about the 10th Top 500 ranking.
Yeah, so this has been a decade of ongoing research, which you've published a report every year for the last decade, so congratulations on the longevity. But I really want to talk about trends that we've seen over the 10 years. What's changed? I mean, 10 years ago, retailing online was still almost in its infancy. It's become a lot more sophisticated. So what are some of the standouts that you've seen and some of the companies that you've seen that have been here for the long haul?
Well, you say that, but remember, we started in about 2014 with the research starting around 2012, and we'd already been doing real e-commerce, by which I mean e-commerce that generally works every time, for a decade. And for even a decade before that, we had the sort of Wild West pioneering e-com, where you were kind of lucky if your modem stayed connected for the whole
I remember
transaction.
my 14.4 modem with hatred, I have to say.
Well, exactly. But, by 2014, e-commerce was pretty mature. The only real difference, I think, between now and then is that e-commerce was still very much a separate channel. So although we were talking about, omni-channel, unified commerce, pick your own jargon, we'd seen the e-com had started and grown very much on its own. And I think the last decade has been one of integrated commerce being digitally powered. So I think if I look back and said, what's the difference? I think 2014 was the year of e-commerce, whereas 2024 is digitally enabled direct to consumer.
And what are some of the names that are standout? Some of the early pioneers that were there 10 years ago, or back in 2014 when you started the research, that are still around today? And is there anyone that's gone by the wayside that's missing from the top 500 now that back then were a household name?
Well, look, I'm a positive only kind of guy, but let me just throw up a couple of slides to show this. So firstly, no one can read that unless they're 20 years old. It is all available in the top 500 report.
Yeah, we'll put a link just below this video.
Of course, but the elite, and by elite, we're talking about the half dozen who are not only amazing, but they're the bestest of the bestest, if I can put it that way. And so congratulations alphabetically to Amazon, Apple, IKEA, Next, Screwfix, and Tesco. So again, all of these are companies who were around a decade and in fact 20 years ago. And then leading brings us up to effectively the top 25 in the UK. And again, a range of retailers there, but all of them, whether they are marketplaces, department stores, consumer electronics, fast fashion, or even a bathroom supplier, all of them are pretty well-known names. So congratulations to them for blending in the multi-channel as well as their existing businesses.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting seeing some of these names here. There's retailers for sure, but there's also brands and there's also marketplaces. But I think there's four things I wanted to talk through today. And the first is, you mentioned that e-com used to be kind of a separate department for a retailer. They're the weird ones in the corner that look after online. We're all about our stores and our own websites. So how have retailers transitioned over the years, moving from sort of a store-based infrastructure to a digital-first infrastructure?
Well, we tried that initially in what I would call the lipstick on a pig phase of e-com, which is where you look at your business, what's the easiest thing to do? And a website is much easier to throw up and type great claims into than changing your ERP or your supply chain, etc. So what we found was that as retail moved to the end of the 21st century, they had invested and optimized in really hardcore optimized systems. So, think for a moment, the systems needed by Tesco to get thousands of products into hundreds of stores with full availability, pricing transparency, etc., etc. I mean, I'm not a falsely modest man, but it does kind of make me shake to think about it. So if you then say, well, let's throw up a website, that seems easy. But it was based on these big infrastructures. And I think what's happened this century is that those back-end systems have also become more digitally capable, more flexible. And because you have now more modern systems in all parts of your business, from your customer to your product, supply chain, operations, as well as the front end, all of these things are now more able to talk to each other more effectively. And if you then take on top of that the sophistication of the consumer, who is being, let's face it, trained by the best of the best to have high expectations. So if you have an Amazon Prime customer or an ASOS customer who's used to great stock, great experience, fantastic delivery, utter reliability, if they then come to you and you say, well, we're kind of amateurs, really, we try our best, but everything breaks, they're not even going to bother laughing at you. They're just gone. So I think this whole process of savvy consumers with more tractable, optimizable, interoperable backends, and a generation of leaders who are, if you like, digitally demanding themselves, it's all part of a maturing of the industry. And I think that's the big change.
And I'm guessing that the pure play retailer had it a bit easy because they were effectively building internet first systems from day one. But nowadays we're seeing more pure play businesses going multi-channel effectively. What trends are you seeing there?
Well, look, nearly all pure play retailers would like a store or 12 or 50. And all stores need a digital dimension. So in the same way as our customers live in meat space, the clock ticks, we can be in one place at one time. It's unlikely that the majority of retailers and brands will be either 100% online or 100% offline. So I think we're past that. And what we're looking for now is a blend. But where this gets interesting is if you look at someone like an Amazon, while they may not have physical stores, they are in the palm of your hand when you're in other people's stores. So I always say that Amazon's got thousands of stores, they just don't have to pay to run them. And I think this is what we'll see, whether it's brands who have a presence in a department store, or whether it's retailers with their competitors. The customer carries the whole of the internet in her hands anyway. And so you look at the product, you look at the service, experience, availability, and they put those together themselves.
So it's massive changes. And something else I found really interesting is the way that the top 500 used to be heavily retailer based, but it's kind of been infiltrated by brands themselves now, and also marketplaces. What sort of proportion of the top 500 is now brands and marketplaces rather than the traditional high street retailer type operation?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Chris, because we happen to have a chart on that, which I think shows a picture of back in 2015, the innocent days. You had basically retailers and marketplaces. And those marketplaces would be the big, eBays, Amazons, people who started as marketplaces. We then had a trend of brands going direct to consumer, and the people who were impacted by this were largely the department stores, who effectively were the last century's version of a marketplace. They were the emporium that brought a selection of the world's brands together and a selection of those brands' products for your delectation and amusement. And so if you look at the early stage of e-commerce, it was led by the direct mail, direct-to-consumer retailers and the department stores, because they had product availability, category management, they understood ranging, and they had supply chain. For example, you might go into John Lewis, maybe with your wedding list, and there'd be a lovely display, but then you talk to a human who had these big lever arch files of every single piece of conceivable pottery in the whole universe that they could just magically order for you. So they had dropship, extended ranges, web-only ranges, but they weren't called that. So what we've seen is that the brands are now much keener to go direct to consumer. They don't always like losing the wholesale margin with the costs of retail, but they are desperate to have that direct engagement with the consumer. We've then seen the marketplaces growing in terms of specialisms, capability, etc., but also the retailers themselves adopting marketplace technology. So if you think about a department store, they would initially have had a smaller web-only range, which was separate. Then they'd have tried to have the top store range. Then they'd have gone for dropship, maybe third-party, web-only specials. Now they're adding in their own marketplace. So the days, for example, of a brand wholesaling to a retailer might be over, because now they might go onto that retailer's own marketplace. So we see it with Boots, we see it with Decathlon, we see M&S adding more and more brands, likewise John Lewis. So although the marketplace has grown, I think when we chat again in 10 years, Chris, or maybe do it by ESP in the metaverse, who knows, but our next decade, we will laugh at defining businesses as either marketplaces, retailers or not, because quite frankly, they're all starting to merge in terms of business model and operations. And I think these terms are slightly time limited now.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You mentioned Boots, for example, as a marketplace, and B&Q are the same, that they're not only a marketplace, but they're also definitely a retailer. But then they also have their own brand products, so they're a brand as well. But
that's right.
Talking of marketplaces, just how much traffic to the top 500 actually goes to what we would now define as a marketplace, whether it be a traditional Amazon, eBay style marketplace, or whether it be more of a Decathlon, a John Lewis, a Boots, etc.
So we talked earlier on about the number of retailers who are themselves marketplaces, around a fifth, but they get nearly 2/3 of all of the traffic, which means it's a disproportionately high amount. So the squeeze then is put upon the retailers and the brands, with the brands ticking along at around 20% themselves. The retailer direct traffic is declining. So if you're a brand, then you're gaining direct traffic to you, but also a lot of the traffic on the marketplaces is brand-based. So consumers are going to the marketplace to buy products they know at prices they like, maybe shopping across baskets as well. So the people who are losing out slightly on this are the retailers. And that's one of the reasons I think they've been looking at extending their ranges through marketplaces without having to have the cost tied up in stock in order to compete at the higher stock levels. Question would be, though, is there enough stock in the world? So if you're a brand and 50 people say, can I have it in the marketplace? You go, yeah, okay, then. You're not going to reserve the stock for them. And so you could have the same pair of highly desirable sneakers or a kitchen utensil that's listed many, many places at a variety of prices. The poor consumer could be chasing around seeking availability. So I think the next big push is going to be a transparency about where the best products are, not just who's trying to shout to say they have the best products.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting. We might even be going back into a world where the comparison shopping engines come to a fore again to actually tell us that this retailer's actually got it in stock.
So instead of a search engine, you might have an availability engine or an experience engine. All of these things, what we see is that anything that's disintermediated at some point will come back as a value-added service, and the cycle continues.
So, Ian, it's been fascinating to talk to you, and looking back over the 10 years of research, what are the top things that the three main categories, the retailer, the brand, and the marketplace, should be thinking about for the next 4 to 5 years?
I think the key thing is a connection with the consumer, and you can connect with your consumer in a couple of ways. You can have the very best products that they want to buy, even if they hate you. Then you can have the very best consumer insight, so that you know what the customer wants, even if she wasn't thinking about buying it from you in the first place. And the third thing you can have is the very best sausage machine. So on the basis you don't care what comes in or comes out, the process is amazing. So those 3 points, the product knowledge, customer knowledge, operational capability, that used to be enough. But I think we're seeing now a new element, which I'm calling purpose or values-driven retail. So in a world where everyone who's got a credit card can get anything they want the next day from anybody, shopping with you has to be more than just the basket, and you need a level of innovation to stay close to the customer, be part of her life, align with her values, and make her want to shop with you, not once, but several times. I think, just to wrap up, the best way of showing this is to look at those who are standing out over time. So in this chart, we can see I've extracted the 76 retailers who have ranked at least once, either as elite or leading. So every year they've been in the top 25. And over the decade, one company stands out, Amazon, because they've been in the elite cluster every year. Argos has been elite for 10 years, leading for 2, Tesco 6 and 4, M&S 5 and 5. So these 4 retailers stand head and shoulders above the rest for both excellence and consistency. And I think if you look at these, a snapshot today, a snapshot 10 years ago, they're not the same retailer. So they have changed that recognition. But if you looked at the adjectives to describe them 10 years ago, those adjectives are the same. So in terms of innovation, investing in customer, testing and trialing, purposeful retail, a clear understanding of their product, the right kind of consumer experience, all of these things you could have said about them then. So I'm at that stage where I'm thinking, if you have the right values allied to a mastery of customer, product, and operations, then you've got a fighting chance of being in the list in 10 years' time.
Well, Ian, I want to thank you for your time today. And as always, ever since the late 1990s, e-commerce has been a constant challenge and looks like to continue in the future. Thing that I'm really interested about is just how many brands and retailers are going to themselves be marketplaces in 10 years' time. And I think that'll be the key. It's the old concession model where you went into a department store and there's a whole load of different concessions you can pick up from any counter and pay at any counter, but they're all in the same place. And I think that's the role of marketplaces. And I think that's the big opportunity for a lot of retailers. So, Ian,
well, I look forward to tracking
that
and seeing who takes advantage of it. Chris, lovely chatting.
And we'll put a link just below this video so you can actually download the 2024 top 500 report. So download that and you'll see all of the data and all of those charts in a lot more detail. Ian, thank you so much.
Great chatting, Chris. See ya.